The night was silent, except for the muffled sobs of a young woman crouched in the corner of a dimly lit kitchen. Anna, only 28 and 6 months pregnant, pressed her trembling hands against her belly, whispering softly to the life inside her. "Please, little one, just hold on." Her words were drowned out by the sound of shattering glass. Mark, her husband, staggered in with the stench of alcohol on his breath. "You useless woman!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the small house. "All you know is whining and failing. Look at you, fat, weak, carrying that brat. You think you deserve to call yourself my wife?" Anna flinched at every word, her tears falling silently. She wanted to scream back, to defend herself, but fear locked her throat. She knew too well what would happen if she spoke. Mark's rage grew with every second. He slammed his fists on the table, grabbed a plate, and hurled it against the wall. The crash was deafening. Anna gasped, holding her stomach tighter, terrified that the stress might hurt her unborn child. Her body shook, not just from fear but from exhaustion. She had spent the whole day running their small restaurant, serving customers while hiding her bruises under long sleeves. Neighbors often heard the screams, but no one dared intervene. They whispered behind closed doors about the poor young woman and her violent husband. But when daylight came, everyone looked away, pretending not to know. That night, Mark's anger turned physical. He shoved her hard, causing her to stumble and nearly fall. Pain shot through her lower back, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. She could not risk making him angrier. When he finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, Anna collapsed on the floor. She wrapped her arms around her belly and whispered again, "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's so sorry." Her tears soaked the floor, mixing with the shards of glass scattered across the kitchen. The next morning, Anna forced herself up before sunrise. Her body ached, but she dressed carefully, covering the bruises, and walked slowly to her little restaurant. Despite everything, she kept it open every day. It was her only source of income, the only way to survive. Customers often noticed the sadness in her eyes, but she always forced a smile. Inside, she brewed coffee, wiped down tables, and tried to hide her limp. Her hands trembled as she set plates in order. She prayed silently that today would be calm, that Mark wouldn't show up to humiliate her in front of customers again. But life had other plans. Just as she opened the doors and greeted her first customer, a strange roaring sound filled the sky. People stepped outside, shading their eyes, trying to see where it came from. Anna looked up, confused. The ground vibrated beneath her feet. A sleek, black helicopter descended right in front of her small restaurant, sending dust and papers flying everywhere. Anna froze in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. And when the door of that helicopter opened, the man who stepped out would change her life forever. Anna was only 28, but her face carried the weariness of someone twice her age. Life had been cruel to her, shaping lines of pain on her once bright features. Yet behind those tired eyes was still a quiet strength, a stubborn will to keep moving forward despite everything. She had grown up in a modest family, where love was abundant, even if money wasn't. Her parents raised her with kindness, teaching her to value honesty and compassion above all else. They used to tell her she deserved happiness, that one day she would meet someone who would protect her and cherish her. Anna believed them, and that belief led her to marry Mark. At first he seemed charming, confident, ambitious, full of promises. He told her he wanted to build a future together, that he would take care of her. She trusted him completely. But after the wedding, his mask slipped away, revealing a cruel and selfish man. His ambition turned to greed, his confidence to arrogance, and his love to abuse. Still, Anna stayed. She told herself it was her duty as a wife. And when she found out she was pregnant, she held on to the hope that the baby might change him. Perhaps, she thought, once he held his child in his arms, he would remember what love was. But instead, his violence only grew worse. Now 6 months pregnant, Anna lived in constant fear. Every bruise she covered with long sleeves, every lie she told neighbors about falling or being clumsy, ate away at her spirit. Yet she never allowed herself to completely break down. She had someone else to think about now. Her unborn child. Her small restaurant was the only place she could breathe, even a little. It wasn't much, just a handful of tables, a squeaky fan, and the smell of home-cooked meals. She worked tirelessly every day, greeting customers with a smile that never reached her eyes. Regulars admired her food and pitied her silence. Some wanted to ask why her eyes looked swollen, why her hands trembled, but they knew she would never tell. When the day ended and she returned home, she often stood in front of the mirror, touching her swollen belly, whispering, "I'll give you a better life, I promise." That promise became her anchor. Without it, she might have lost the will to go on. But even her determination had limits. Nights of violence, mornings of forced smiles, days of endless labor. Her body was breaking. The doctor had already warned her, one more serious injury, and she could lose the baby. Anna kept that truth hidden, even from Mark. She couldn't risk his wrath if he thought she was weak. Every step she took was a battle between fear and hope. She wanted to escape, but she had nowhere to go. On that morning, when the helicopter landed in front of her restaurant, Anna stood frozen in shock. She shielded her eyes from the wind, clutching her belly instinctively. Customers gasped and ran outside, whispering in disbelief. And when the door opened, a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out, his eyes searching the crowd until they found hers. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen that face in over a decade. But why was he here, and what did he want with her? Anna's small restaurant stood at the edge of a busy street, a place where ordinary workers and travelers stopped for a hot meal and a moment of comfort. The walls were painted a faded cream, with little cracks that told stories of years of struggle. The chairs didn't match, the fan above squeaked on humid days, and the smell of fried rice and soup always lingered in the air. It wasn't luxurious, but to Anna, it was a symbol of survival. Every morning, before the sun rose, she opened its doors. Her swollen belly made it difficult to move quickly, yet she swept the floors, boiled broth, and set the tables. Some mornings her hands shook so badly from the night before that she spilled soup or dropped cups. She always muttered an apology under her breath, even though no one was there to hear it. Despite the bruises hidden under her sleeves, Anna greeted every customer with warmth. She called them by name, remembered their favorite dishes, and always offered an extra smile to children. The regulars noticed the sadness in her eyes but respected her silence. For them, the little restaurant wasn't just a place to eat. It was a safe corner in a harsh world, just like Anna herself. Behind the counter, there was a framed photo of Anna and Mark from their wedding day. She kept it there not out of love, but because she couldn't bear the gossip if she removed it. Customers often glanced at the picture and shook their heads. The man in the photo looked so polished, so charming, but the reality was nothing like the image. At night, when the restaurant closed, the atmosphere changed. The laughter of customers faded, and the walls that once echoed with chatter now absorbed the sound of Mark's anger. He often stormed in, drunk, accusing Anna of failing him, of being worthless. Sometimes he dragged her out in front of the last few customers, humiliating her by shouting cruel words. Each time, Anna lowered her head, too afraid to respond. Yet even in the darkest moments, there was a flicker of light. The unborn child inside her gave her strength. She clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, life would offer her a second chance. When she lay in bed at night, curled around her belly, she whispered dreams into the darkness. Dreams of raising her child in peace, far away from Mark's fists and insults. That fragile hope was the thread holding her together. Without it, she would have collapsed long ago. And then, one morning, when the sun had barely touched the horizon, that thread was tested. The ground trembled as the helicopter descended, its blades cutting through the air with a thunderous roar. Dust swirled, customers shielded their faces, and Anna's heart raced. She had never seen anything like it, not in her quiet, ordinary street. The crowd parted as the helicopter door opened. A tall figure emerged, dressed in a suit too fine for this small town. His eyes swept over the restaurant, then locked on Anna. His gaze was intense, almost overwhelming, as if he had been searching for her all along. Anna froze, her heart pounding. The man walking toward her was someone from her past, a past she had tried so hard to bury. Mark was 32, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that once charmed Anna into believing he was her savior. But years of arrogance and cruelty had hardened his features. His eyes, once warm, now carried only disdain. His lips curled into a sneer more often than a smile. To the outside world, he pretended to be a respectable husband, but behind closed doors, he was a tyrant. What hurt Anna most wasn't only his fists or his words, but the betrayal of who he had become. He was supposed to protect her, but instead he destroyed her piece by piece. Mark's cruelty didn't stop at home. He often visited Anna's restaurant, not to support her, but to humiliate her. He would slam his fist on the counter, demand free food, and mock her in front of customers. When he was especially cruel, he would bring along another woman, his lover, Lisa. Lisa was younger, only 24, with long, dyed hair and heavy makeup. She wore flashy clothes and carried herself like she was untouchable. She enjoyed every moment of watching Anna suffer, whispering insults and laughing loudly so customers could hear. Lisa wasn't ashamed of the affair. In fact, she flaunted it, treating Anna like nothing more than a servant. "Poor thing," Lisa would say, draping herself on Mark's arm. "You're still cooking here while your husband enjoys real company with me. How pathetic." Anna never responded. She kept her head down, focusing on her work, her hands trembling as she served them food. Inside, though, her heart broke a little more each time. The neighborhood knew about Mark's infidelity. They whispered among themselves, shocked that he would flaunt his betrayal so openly. But no one dared to confront him. He was loud, aggressive, and unafraid to fight anyone who stood in his way. Anna became the subject of pity, a silent figure people shook their heads about, but never helped. At home, Mark used Lisa's presence as another weapon. He compared them constantly, saying Lisa was younger, prettier, more exciting. "Look at yourself, Anna," he would spit. "Who would want a worn-out woman like you? You should be grateful I even let you stay in this house." Every word cut deeper than the bruises. But Anna endured, for the sake of her unborn child. Mark's greed only grew worse with time. He started talking about selling Anna's restaurant to pay off his debts. The thought of losing the only place that gave her purpose made her sick. But Mark didn't care. He saw her restaurant as nothing more than property he could exploit. Lisa encouraged him, whispering poison into his ear. "Get rid of her," she said more than once. "She's dragging you down. That restaurant could be turned into something better, something that makes real money." And Mark listened. His contempt for Anna deepened as Lisa's influence grew. On the morning the helicopter landed, Mark appeared at the restaurant with Lisa by his side. He smirked, as if he owned the world, pulling Lisa close while customers stared. But when he saw the man stepping out of the helicopter, his smile faltered. His grip on Lisa's arm tightened. Anna stood frozen, her eyes locked on the mysterious figure approaching. Mark's jaw clenched. Who was this man, and why was he looking at Anna as if she mattered? The restaurant, usually filled with the gentle clatter of dishes and the soft hum of conversation, was suddenly silent. Customers froze in their seats, staring wide-eyed as the black helicopter settled in front of Anna's humble place. Dust whipped through the street, knocking over a chair and rattling the flimsy sign that hung above the door. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She clutched her swollen belly, shielding it instinctively, while her mind raced. Who was this man in the fine suit, and why had he come here of all places? The tall stranger stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. His gaze was locked on Anna, unshaken by the curious stares of the crowd. He walked with purpose, like someone who belonged to another world entirely. Mark, who had just swaggered in with Lisa hanging off his arm, froze mid-step. The arrogant smirk that always curved his lips vanished. His face stiffened, his jaw tightening as he pulled Lisa closer, as though trying to prove something. The stranger stopped just a few feet from Anna. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a calm but commanding voice, he said her name. Anna. Her knees almost buckled. She hadn't heard that voice in over 10 years. Memories flashed in her mind. A boy with kind eyes, someone who once stood up for her in school, someone who disappeared without a word. James. Before Anna could respond, Mark pushed past her roughly, standing between her and the man. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Mark barked, puffing out his chest. "This is my wife. You don't just walk in here and act like you own the place." The customers shifted uncomfortably. They had seen Mark's temper before, but this time was different. This time, there was someone strong enough to stand against him. Lisa sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. "Oh look, Anna has a secret admirer. How embarrassing. No wonder you're such a miserable wife. You've been busy with another man." She laughed loudly, clutching Mark's arm as if to remind everyone of her claim. Anna's face burned. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. The humiliation was unbearable. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the restaurant, staring, judging, whispering. James didn't flinch. His calm eyes shifted from Anna to Mark, then back again. "I'm not here for trouble," he said evenly. "I'm here because Anna deserves better than this." Gasps rippled through the room. Customers exchanged glances, shocked that someone had finally spoken aloud what they all knew, but never dared to say. Mark's face turned red with fury. He shoved Anna aside, nearly causing her to stumble. "Better? You think you know anything about her life? She's nothing without me," he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. James's expression hardened, but before he could speak again, Mark raised his hand as if to strike Anna right there. In front of everyone, the crowd gasped, a woman screamed, and Lisa's grin widened with satisfaction. But this time Anna didn't lower her head. She stood frozen, waiting for the blow. And just as Mark's hand swung through the air, something stopped him cold, leaving the entire restaurant stunned. The moment Mark's hand froze in midair, the entire restaurant went silent. James had stepped forward, his grip tight around Mark's wrist, stopping the blow that was about to land on Anna. Gasps filled the room, and customers leaned forward in disbelief. No one had ever dared to stand up to Mark before. Mark's face twisted with rage, but James's calm stare was unshaken. "Touch her again, and you'll regret it," he said firmly. Mark yanked his arm back, trying to save face, but his pride had already been shattered in front of a dozen witnesses. Lisa tugged at his sleeve, whispering poison in his ear. "Don't let him humiliate you like this. Show them who's in charge." Anna stood frozen, her breath shallow, her hands trembling at her sides. For a brief second she had felt protected, but the fear inside her chest only grew. She had lived so long under Mark's shadow that even when someone defended her, she felt ashamed, exposed. The weight of humiliation in front of everyone was too much. Her knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, clutching her belly. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent but unstoppable. The customers looked at her with pity, some shaking their heads, others whispering, but no one dared to move closer. They were too afraid of Mark. James crouched down beside her, his voice soft. "Anna, it's okay. You don't have to go through this anymore." But Anna shook her head desperately, whispering so only he could hear. "Please, don't make it worse. He'll kill me when we're alone. Please, just go." The desperation in her eyes tore at James's heart. For years, he had searched for her, wondering what had become of the girl he once knew. Now, seeing her broken, bruised, and terrified, he could barely hold back his anger. But he respected her plea. For the moment, he stepped back, though his gaze never left Mark. Mark puffed out his chest, laughing harshly to cover his shaken pride. "See? Even she doesn't want your pity," he sneered at James. "This is my wife. She knows her place." Anna's tears blurred her vision. She felt trapped like a bird with broken wings. When James's figure blurred into the crowd, her chest tightened with despair. A part of her wanted to scream after him, to beg him not to leave. But the fear of Mark's wrath chained her silence. That night, back at home, the breakdown finally came. As soon as the door closed, Mark exploded. He hurled insults, shoved her against the wall, and reminded her she was worthless. Lisa's laughter still echoed in Anna's ears. When Mark finally staggered off to bed, leaving her crumpled on the floor, Anna wrapped her arms around her belly and sobbed uncontrollably. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered into the darkness. "I can't." Her body shook with exhaustion, her tears soaking the floor. For the first time, the thought crossed her mind. Maybe leaving this world was the only way to end the pain. She stared at the kitchen knife lying on the counter, her hand trembling as she reached toward it. But just as her fingers brushed the handle, she heard a soft sound, her baby kicking inside her womb. She froze, gasping, her tears falling harder. That tiny kick was a reminder. She wasn't alone, and she had one reason left to fight. But how could she possibly survive this nightmare? The night dragged on endlessly after Anna's breakdown. She lay awake in the dark, one hand resting on her belly, the other wiping tears that wouldn't stop. The thought of ending her pain haunted her, but the tiny kick of her unborn child had pulled her back from the edge. For the sake of the baby, she forced herself to keep breathing. The next morning, she walked to the restaurant as if nothing had happened. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen, but she carried herself with the same quiet determination. Customers came and went, whispering about the scene with the helicopter, about the man who had called her name so tenderly. Anna tried to ignore the murmurs, though inside her heart throbbed with confusion. Why had James returned now, after so many years? As she set a bowl of soup before a customer, the restaurant door opened again. Her breath caught in her throat. James stood there, tall and composed, his sharp suit out of place among the humble chairs and tables. Conversations died as every head turned toward him. Anna froze, torn between relief and dread. She wanted to tell him to leave before Mark returned, but her body wouldn't move. James walked to the counter, his eyes never leaving hers. "Anna," he said gently, his voice carrying just enough for the room to hear. "We need to talk." Her heart pounded. She shook her head quickly, whispering, "Please, not here. You don't understand. If Mark sees you again, he'll..." James leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I do understand. That's why I came back. I should have told you long ago, but I couldn't. Not then." Anna blinked, confused. "Told me what?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then James spoke words that made her knees go weak. "I'm not just here by chance. I've been searching for you for years. You saved me once, Anna, and now it's my turn to save you." Her mind spun. Memories surfaced. Years ago, when they were teenagers, James had been the shy boy from a poor family, bullied by others. One day, Anna had defended him, standing up when no one else would. That small act of kindness had changed everything for him. "I never forgot what you did," James continued. "After my family moved away, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I'd come back for you. I built my company from nothing, Anna, and when I finally found out what you were going through..." His jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "I couldn't stay away any longer." Anna's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her chest tightened with shock and disbelief. Could this really be true? Was this man, standing before her with power and wealth, the same boy she once defended on a schoolyard? But before she could process it, the restaurant door slammed open. Mark stormed in, Lisa clinging to his arm, his face twisted with fury. He had heard enough of the whispers outside. His voice thundered through the room. "So this is what's been going on behind my back." His eyes burned as he glared at Anna. "You ungrateful woman, you've been planning this all along, haven't you?" Anna shook her head frantically, her voice breaking. "No, Mark, it's not what you think." But Mark wasn't listening. His rage boiled over, and what he did next left everyone in the restaurant gasping in horror. Mark's fury erupted like a storm. Before Anna could explain, he lunged at her, shoving her so hard she stumbled against a table. Customers screamed, chairs scraped the floor, and dishes shattered. Anna cried out, clutching her belly as pain shot through her side. James was there in an instant, pulling Mark back with a force that shocked everyone. His voice thundered. "Enough!" The word echoed in the small restaurant, silencing the chaos. For the first time, Mark looked rattled. Customers who usually averted their eyes from Anna's suffering now rose to their feet. A few shouted, "Stop it." Others pulled out their phones, recording everything. The humiliation Mark had tried to inflict on Anna now turned back on him, his violence exposed for all to see. But Anna wasn't focused on the crowd. She sat trembling on the floor, clutching her stomach, terrified for her baby. Tears blurred her vision as James knelt beside her, his voice low but steady. "Anna, listen to me. You can't keep living like this. You have to fight back, not just for yourself but for your child." His words pierced through the fog of fear clouding her mind. For so long she had endured silently, believing she had no choice. But in that moment, as she felt the fragile life moving inside her, she realized James was right. If she continued down this path, she might not survive, and neither would her baby. Mark, furious at being challenged, tried to step forward again, but James raised a hand, his glare cold and unyielding. "Touch her again, and you'll answer to me, and to everyone watching." Phones remained pointed at Mark, their cameras capturing every second. For the first time, the bully found himself cornered. Lisa hissed in his ear, urging him to leave, but Mark's pride wouldn't allow it. He spat on the floor, glaring at Anna. "This isn't over. You think you can embarrass me? You'll pay for this when we get home." James helped Anna to her feet, steadying her trembling body. Her heart raced, fear colliding with something new, resolve. For years she had been silent, enduring pain in the shadows. But now, with eyes watching, with proof in hand, she had a chance. That night, Anna sat alone in her tiny bedroom, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The bruises on her face told a story of years wasted on a man who never loved her. She touched her swollen belly and whispered, "I won't let him hurt you. Not anymore." It was the first time she admitted it aloud, not just to herself, but to her child. It was a vow. The next morning, she dressed differently. Instead of covering her bruises with shame, she tied her hair back neatly and wore a plain but clean dress. Her eyes still carried pain, but beneath it was something harder, determination. When she arrived at the restaurant, James was already waiting outside. He looked at her closely and saw the change. "You've made a decision," he said quietly. Anna nodded. "Yes, I won't be silent anymore." But neither of them knew that Mark was already plotting his revenge, and his next move would be more dangerous than ever. The news of the helicopter, James's return, and Mark's public outburst spread through the small town like wildfire. Videos of Mark's attempt to strike Anna in the restaurant circulated online, gaining hundreds of shares within hours. For the first time, his mask of respectability cracked wide open for everyone to see. But Mark wasn't ready to accept defeat. His pride burned hotter than his fear of exposure. "They think they can humiliate me?" he growled to Lisa as they sat in a dim bar that evening. "I'll show them who really holds power. No one makes a fool out of me." Lisa, ever the instigator, leaned close with a sly smile. "Then do it in public. Make her feel small in front of everyone. You know the mayor's charity gala is coming up. Everyone important will be there. Imagine her shame when you walk in with me on your arm and strip away what little dignity she has left." Mark smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Perfect." Meanwhile, James urged Anna to stay away from the event. "You don't need to face them there," he said gently. "Your safety and the baby's health come first." But Anna shook her head. Her voice was quiet but firm. "If I hide, he wins again. I can't let him keep controlling the story. This time, people need to hear the truth from me." The night of the gala arrived. The grand hall glittered with chandeliers, the air buzzing with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Guests wore elegant gowns and sharp suits, their conversations laced with gossip. Whispers about Anna and the scandal were already circulating, feeding hungry eyes eager for drama. Anna entered the hall slowly, her dress simple but graceful, her hair tied back neatly. James walked beside her, tall and commanding, drawing curious stares from every corner of the room. Together, they looked like a stark contrast to the misery people once associated with her. Then the room shifted. Mark strode in with Lisa clinging to his arm, both dressed extravagantly. He puffed out his chest, his grin wide, as if daring anyone to mention the viral video. He raised his glass, pretending to toast to his own strength. But the atmosphere grew tense as the two couples locked eyes across the hall. Conversations fell quiet, the crowd sensing the storm about to break. Mark approached, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Well, my runaway wife shows her face in public. And look, with her old boyfriend too. Tell me, Anna, is this the kind of one you want to admire? A pregnant wife who betrays her husband?" Gasps filled the room. Lisa smirked, her arms snaking tighter around Mark. Anna's hands trembled, but James's steady presence grounded her. She took a deep breath, then raised her chin. For the first time in years, she looked Mark directly in the eyes. Her voice didn't shake. "No, Mark, I'm not the one who betrayed. You did. And tonight, everyone will know the truth." The room went silent, anticipation thickened the air. Mark laughed harshly, waving her words away. "You think anyone will believe you?" But just as he spoke, James signaled to someone in the crowd, and a man stepped forward holding a folder that would shatter Mark's lies once and for all. The man James had signaled stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. In his hands was a thick folder, bound tightly, its edges marked with official stamps. The crowd's murmurs swelled, curiosity sparking like wildfire. Mark's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, but he quickly straightened his shoulders, glaring at James with cold defiance. James's voice carried across the grand hall, firm and unyielding. "This isn't just about betrayal in a marriage. This is about a man who has lied, cheated, and abused the people who trusted him. And tonight, the truth comes out. The man opened the folder, pulling out photographs, receipts, and documents. He handed them to James, who held them up for the crowd to see. "These are records of Mark's gambling debts," James explained. "Proof that he used Anna's restaurant profits to cover his losses, even while he let her work to exhaustion." Gasps filled the room. Guests leaned forward, whispering in disbelief. James continued, his voice sharp. "Here are bank statements showing he took out loans in Anna's name without her knowledge. He forged her signature. He trapped her not only in a violent marriage, but in financial chains she didn't even know existed." Anna's knees wobbled. Hearing the truth spoken aloud was like reopening a wound she had hidden for years. But at the same time, she felt something stir inside her. Validation. The lies she had endured were finally being stripped bare in front of everyone. Mark's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. "This is nonsense. Lies. Fabrications," he shouted, his voice cracking under pressure. But James wasn't finished. He motioned for the man to display a final set of photographs on the projector screen behind them. The images flickered to life. Mark and Lisa, wrapped in each other's arms at luxury hotels, dining in expensive restaurants, their intimacy captured in candid shots. A collective gasp swept the hall. Some guests covered their mouths in shock, others shook their heads in disgust. Lisa's confident smirk vanished, her face draining of color as she realized her private escapades had become public spectacle. Anna stood frozen, her chest heaving. She had suspected, endured, even heard the whispers. But seeing the truth displayed so openly was still like a blade to the heart. Yet instead of breaking her, it fueled a quiet fire inside. Mark lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger at James. "You set this up. You're obsessed with her, aren't you? You think you can just walk in and take my wife?" His voice cracked with desperation now, the bravado slipping away. James's reply was steady. "No, Mark. You lost the right to call her your wife the day you chose violence and betrayal." The crowd erupted into whispers, their judgment clear. Mark had been exposed, stripped of the image he had worked so hard to project. For the first time, the power he wielded so cruelly was slipping from his grasp. Anna's hands trembled, but she lifted her head high. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to speak. Her voice, though soft, carried across the hall. "You tried to silence me for years, but tonight, everyone sees who you really are." Mark's face twisted with rage and fear, his pride shattered. And in that moment, he realized his downfall was no longer coming. It was already here. The gala hall buzzed with chaos after the documents and photographs were revealed. Guests whispered, shook their heads, and some even openly scolded Mark for his shameless actions. Lisa shrank back, her painted smile gone, her eyes darting for an exit. Mark stood stiff, his chest heaving, fury and fear battling across his face. But in the middle of the storm, Anna felt the world blur. The chandelier lights above seemed too bright, the voices around her too sharp. Her heart pounded unevenly, and her breath came shallow. Her body was already weak from months of stress and abuse. Now, the weight of years of secrets crashing down in a single night was too much. Her vision swayed, and before she could stop herself, her knees gave out. The crowd gasped as she collapsed onto the marble floor, clutching her belly. Pain shot through her, sharp and unrelenting. "The baby?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. James was instantly at her side, kneeling down and lifting her gently into his arms. "Anna, stay with me." His voice trembled with urgency, his calm composure shattering for the first time. He barked orders to the crowd. "Call an ambulance. Now." The guests scrambled, some dialing phones, others rushing to clear the way. Mark stood frozen, shock flickering across his face. For a moment it almost looked like guilt, but then it twisted into anger once again. "She's faking it," he muttered, his voice bitter, though it cracked under the weight of doubt. Anna's tears spilled freely as she clutched at James's sleeve. "Please, don't let him near me. Don't let him hurt my baby." Her words broke James's heart into pieces. As paramedics arrived and lifted Anna onto a stretcher, James held her hand tightly. "You're going to be okay. I promise you," he whispered, though fear gnawed at him inside. At the hospital, the sterile white walls and sharp scent of antiseptic pressed down on Anna as she lay on the bed. Monitors beeped steadily, and doctors moved quickly, checking her condition and the baby's heartbeat. James paced outside the room, his fists clenched, replaying every moment in his head. He had wanted to save her, but now she was slipping through his fingers. Hours passed like years. Finally, a doctor stepped out, his expression serious but calm. "She and the baby are stable," he announced. Relief swept over James so strongly that his legs nearly gave out. He exhaled shakily, whispering a prayer of thanks. When James entered Anna's room, she lay pale against the pillows, her eyes tired but awake. She looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "I don't know how much more I can take," she admitted softly. "Every time I think it can't get worse, it does." James sat beside her, his voice low and steady. "Then it's time for it to end. You don't have to suffer anymore. I'll make sure of it." Anna closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Deep down, she wanted to believe him, but a lifetime of fear whispered otherwise. And outside the hospital, in the shadows, Mark was waiting, his pride wounded, his rage boiling, and his next move more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Outside the hospital, Mark paced like a caged animal, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. The cool night air did nothing to calm the fire raging inside him. His reputation had been shredded in front of the entire town, his secret debts and affair exposed. And worst of all, Anna had dared to stand against him, with James by her side. He replayed the humiliation over and over in his head, each memory cutting deeper than the last. The whispers of the guests, the disgusted looks, Lisa's silence as she slipped away from his side, it was unbearable. He had always controlled the story, controlled Anna, controlled everything, but now the world saw him for what he was. Mark spat on the ground, muttering under his breath. "If she thinks she can ruin me, she's dead wrong." A dark thought began to form. If he couldn't have control, then no one could. If Anna refused to stay under his thumb, then he would make sure she paid the ultimate price. That night, Mark sat alone in his dingy apartment, bottles scattered across the table. His phone buzzed with messages from creditors demanding payment, but he ignored them. His mind was consumed by one plan. He would take everything from Anna, her restaurant, her dignity, even the child she carried. He made calls to shady acquaintances, men who owed him favors from his gambling days. "I need something handled," he whispered into the phone, his voice low and menacing. "She won't see it coming." On the other end, a chuckle. "You always were reckless, Mark, but for the right price, anything can be arranged." Mark's grin returned, cold and twisted. He didn't care about the cost. This wasn't just revenge. This was survival. If Anna was gone, so were his debts in her name, and without her, James would have nothing to hold over him. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, Anna lay awake despite the doctor's orders to rest. Every creak in the hallway, every shadow passing her door made her shiver. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't finished. The look in his eyes at the gala, the mixture of hatred and desperation, haunted her. James stayed by her side, refusing to leave even when she urged him to rest. "He won't touch you again," James said firmly, his hand covering hers. "Not while I'm here." But Anna knew Mark too well. He wasn't the type to give up. His pride was a weapon, and he would rather destroy everything than admit defeat. Days later, as Anna was discharged from the hospital, the atmosphere around her seemed heavier. James insisted on escorting her home, but even his presence couldn't erase the feeling that danger was closing in. Neighbors whispered that Mark had been seen wandering at night, his eyes wild, his words incoherent. Some claimed he was asking questions about the restaurant's security, others that he was seen with men no decent person would trust. Anna tried to dismiss the rumors, but her heart knew the truth. Mark was planning something terrible. And late one evening, as she closed the restaurant, a shadow moved across the doorway, and Anna realized with a jolt of terror that the nightmare was far from over. The restaurant was quiet that evening, its lights casting long shadows across the empty tables. Anna wiped the counter slowly, her body still weak from the hospital stay. James had insisted she close early and rest, but stubborn as ever, she wanted to prove she could still stand on her own 2 feet. The bell above the door jingled. Anna turned with a practiced smile, expecting a late customer. But her heart froze. It was Mark. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, and the smell of alcohol clung to him. He leaned against the doorway, a twisted grin on his face. Well, My lovely wife, out of the hospital so soon? Guess you're tougher than you look. Anna's hand tightened on the cloth she was holding. You shouldn't be here, Mark. Leave. He laughed harshly, the sound echoing through the empty restaurant. Leave? This is my place. My wife, my property, or did you forget your vows? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Do you know how that feels? To be laughed at like a fool? Anna forced herself to stand tall, though her knees trembled. You did that to yourself. Everyone knows the truth now. You can't hide anymore. His grin vanished, his face twisted with rage, and in 2 strides he was across the room, slamming his hands on the counter. The plates rattled, and Anna flinched. You think James will save you? He spat. He doesn't care about you. He only wants to use you to destroy me. And when he's done, he'll leave you like trash, just like everyone else. Anna swallowed hard, fighting back tears. She wouldn't let him see her break. Not this time. You're wrong. For once, I'm not alone, and you can't hurt me anymore. Mark's eyes narrowed, his breath ragged. We'll see about that. He reached into his coat, and Anna's blood ran cold when she saw the glint of metal. It wasn't just words anymore. He had brought a weapon. Her heart pounded, her instincts screaming to protect the child inside her. She backed away slowly, her hand reaching for her phone on the counter. But Mark's eyes caught the movement, and he slammed his fist down, knocking it to the floor. You don't call anyone, he growled. Tonight, it's just you and me. Anna's breath came in shallow gasps. She forced her voice to stay steady. If you hurt me, there will be no going back. Everyone will know it was you. Mark smirked darkly. They already think I'm a monster. What's one more crime? Her body shook, but her spirit didn't break. She looked him straight in the eyes, her hand protectively over her belly. If you do this, you'll never escape the truth. Not in this life, not ever. For a brief second, his grip on the weapon faltered, uncertainty flickering across his face, but then his jaw tightened, and he raised it higher. And just as Anna braced herself for the worst, the restaurant door burst open, and a familiar voice shouted her name. The door slammed open with such force that the bell above it snapped off and clattered to the floor. Anna's head whipped toward the sound, her heart racing. James stood there, his eyes blazing with fury as he took in the sight, Mark towering over Anna, weapon raised, her trembling hand cradling her belly. Step away from her. James's voice thundered through the restaurant. Mark froze for half a second, startled, before his lips curled into a sneer. Look who's here, the knight in shining armor. You think you can take what's mine? James stepped forward slowly, his stance steady, his fists clenched. She's not yours, Mark. She's never been yours. All you've ever done is break her. His voice softened as he looked at Anna, trembling against the counter. But that ends tonight. Mark's grip on the weapon tightened, his hand shaking slightly. Stay back, James. I swear I'll do it. I've got nothing left to lose. The air grew thick with tension. Anna's breath came in shallow bursts, her eyes darting between the 2 men. She whispered, Please, don't let him hurt the baby. James's gaze hardened. Mark, listen carefully. If you hurt her, there's no coming back. The whole town saw what you did at the gala. The police are already circling. One more step, and you'll spend the rest of your life rotting in a cell. Mark laughed bitterly. A cell? At least in a cell no one laughs at me. At least there I'm still a man. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through his bravado. James slowly raised his hands, palms open. You don't have to end it like this. Walk away. Leave her alone, and maybe you'll have a chance to start over. But if you touch her again, I will stop you myself. Anna's knees buckled, and she clung to the counter for balance. The baby kicked inside her, sharp and sudden, as if reminding her she had something precious to protect. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to speak. Mark, please, don't make this worse. Let me go. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Mark's hand wavered, the weapon dipping slightly. His face twisted with conflict, between pride, rage, and the faint echo of guilt. But then, with a guttural growl, he lunged forward. Anna screamed. James moved faster than she had ever seen. He tackled Mark, the 2 men crashing to the ground with a thunderous thud. The weapon clattered across the floor, sliding under a table. Chairs toppled, dishes shattered, and the struggle turned into a whirlwind of fists and fury. Run, Anna! James shouted through gritted teeth as he grappled with Mark. Anna's body froze, her mind screaming at her to move. She staggered toward the door, every step heavy with fear and adrenaline. Behind her, the sounds of the fight echoed, grunts, curses, and the crash of furniture breaking. Just as her hand touched the doorknob, a loud crack split the air. Both men froze. Anna turned slowly, her heart hammering. The weapon wasn't under the table anymore. Someone else was holding it, and the barrel was pointed straight at them. The crack of metal against wood echoed through the restaurant, and all three froze. Anna's trembling eyes followed the sound until they landed on the figure now standing near the doorway. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a customer. It was Lisa. Her manicured hand clutched the weapon, her lips twisted into a cruel smirk. "Well, isn't this a picture?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "The cheating husband, the pathetic wife, and the self-righteous hero. What a show." Anna's stomach dropped. "Lisa? What are you doing?" Lisa laughed coldly, waving the weapon carelessly. "What am I doing? I'm cleaning up a mess. Mark promised me everything: money, power, the restaurant, even this whole town watching us in awe. And what did I get instead? Public humiliation and my face plastered all over as his mistress. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Mark, still pinned beneath James, struggled. "Lisa, put that down. We can still fix this." Her eyes flashed with fury. "Fix this? You dragged me down with you, Mark. Everyone knows what we are now. My family won't even answer my calls. Do you think I'm going to let you walk away and leave me to rot?" James's voice was calm but firm. "Lisa, listen to me. You don't want to do this. Walk away now before it's too late." She sneered at him. "Spare me your hero talk. You think you're so noble, swooping in to save poor Anna, but you're no better than him. You're just another man trying to play God with her life." Anna shook her head desperately, her voice breaking. "No, Lisa, James isn't like that. He's the only one who's ever tried to help me. Please, if you have any humanity left, don't do this." For a flicker of a moment, Lisa's grip loosened, uncertainty clouding her eyes. But then she glanced at Mark, still pinned under James, and her face hardened again. "You know what, Anna?" Lisa's tone turned mocking. "You always played the victim so well, the weak little wife everyone pitied, but I'm tired of your sad eyes and your pitiful act. Tonight, I end it. No more Anna, no more drama. Just silence." She raised the weapon, pointing it directly at Anna's chest. Anna's breath caught, her hand flying protectively to her belly. Time seemed to slow, her vision narrowing to the barrel aimed at her. She whispered a silent prayer for her child, her knees buckling beneath her. James shifted quickly, pulling Mark tighter beneath him, his eyes locked on Lisa. "If you pull that trigger, Lisa, your life ends here too. Think carefully. Once you cross that line, there's no way back." But Lisa's smile widened, her finger twitching on the trigger. "Then I guess we all go down together." And just as the weapon fired, a deafening blast shook the restaurant. Yet when the smoke cleared, the bullet hadn't struck Anna. Someone else had stepped between her and death. The shot rang out like thunder, rattling the glass windows and sending a cloud of smoke across the restaurant. Anna's scream tore through the air as she stumbled backward, shielding her belly. But when the haze cleared, she realized the bullet hadn't struck her. Mr. Johnson, the elderly neighbor who often ate dinner at her restaurant and had always offered kind words, was standing in front of her, clutching his chest. His cane clattered to the floor, and his frail body swayed before collapsing into Anna's arms. "Mr. Johnson," she cried, lowering herself to the ground with him. Her tears spilled as she tried to stop the bleeding with her trembling hands. "Why? Why would you do this?" The old man coughed, his voice raspy but steady. "Because, child, you reminded me of my daughter. I couldn't let you suffer anymore." His hand reached weakly for hers. "Promise me, you'll live. For the baby." Anna sobbed, gripping his hand tightly. "I promise. Please, just hold on." But his eyes fluttered closed, and with one final breath, his hand went limp. Anna's cries echoed painfully, shaking the room to its core. Lisa stood frozen, the weapon trembling in her grip. For the first time, her confident smirk vanished, replaced by shock and fear. She hadn't expected anyone to intervene, least of all an old man. Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean." James seized the moment. With a burst of strength, he shoved Mark aside and lunged for Lisa. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it until the weapon fell to the floor with a metallic clang. She shrieked, struggling to break free, but James pinned her down. Mark scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide, darting between Anna's sobbing figure and James' overpowering Lisa. His pride screamed at him to fight, but his cowardice rooted him in place. The restaurant was chaos, broken chairs, shattered dishes, blood staining the floor. Yet through the noise, Anna's cries pierced the loudest. She clutched Mr. Johnson's body, rocking back and forth, her promise to him ringing in her mind like a command she couldn't ignore. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Neighbors had heard the gunfire and finally called for help. The flashing lights painted the windows in red and blue, casting shadows across the wreckage. James shouted over the noise, his voice firm. "It's over, Mark. It's over. Lisa, you'll answer for everything tonight." Mark's eyes darted wildly, sweat pouring down his face. No, it's not over. Not for me." He bolted toward the back door, his footsteps pounding against the floorboards. Lisa cried out, "Wait, don't leave me." But Mark didn't look back. James cursed, torn between chasing Mark and restraining Lisa. He glanced at Anna, who was still cradling Mr. Johnson's lifeless body, her face pale and streaked with tears. The police burst through the doors, weapons drawn, shouting commands. In the confusion, Lisa screamed, thrashing violently against James's grip. And in that chaos, no one noticed Mark slipping into the night, with vengeance burning in his eyes and one last plan that would put Anna in even greater danger. The flashing red and blue lights outside the restaurant cast eerie shadows across the broken furniture and blood-stained floor. Officers cuffed Lisa, dragging her away as she screamed and kicked, her voice a mixture of rage and desperation. James stayed close to Anna, who sat numbly on the floor, rocking gently as if still holding Mr. Johnson's spirit in her arms. But while the police secured the scene, Mark was nowhere to be found. He had slipped into the night like a shadow, his mind twisting with rage and humiliation. Every step he took away from the restaurant only fueled his fury. He had lost everything: his wife, his lover, his reputation, even the respect of the town. And in his warped mind, there was only one person to blame: Anna. As he stumbled through the dark streets, his thoughts raced. If she hadn't embarrassed me, none of this would have happened. She ruined me. She took everything. And now I'll take everything from her. By dawn, Mark had already crafted his final plan. He knew Anna's routines, her weaknesses, her fears. He knew she couldn't leave the restaurant, her only lifeline, and that James couldn't watch her every second. If he struck smart, he could end this once and for all. The next day, Anna tried to return to normal, though nothing felt normal anymore. Her body ached, her eyes were swollen from crying, and every corner of the restaurant reminded her of Mr. Johnson's sacrifice. Still, she opened the doors, telling herself she owed it to him to keep moving forward. James insisted on staying close, but business matters forced him to step away briefly. "I'll be back in an hour," he promised, holding her hand. "Keep the doors locked, and don't trust anyone you don't know." Anna nodded, but her heart raced as soon as he left. A gnawing sense of dread clung to her. She whispered to her unborn child, "We'll be okay. Mommy will protect you." Unseen by her, Mark lurked in the shadows across the street, watching, waiting. He had spent the night gathering supplies: a can of gasoline, a box of matches, and a twisted determination. If he couldn't have Anna, no one would. If she wanted her restaurant so badly, he would make sure she burned with it. As the sun dipped low, Mark made his move. He slipped around the back of the restaurant, careful not to draw attention. The alley was deserted, the perfect place for him to set his plan in motion. He poured gasoline along the wooden walls, the pungent smell filling the air. His hands trembled, not from hesitation, but from adrenaline. Inside, Anna hummed softly to her baby, unaware of the danger creeping closer. She lit candles on the counter, trying to calm her nerves. For a fleeting moment, peace settled over her. Then, a faint smell drifted in, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Her nose wrinkled, her eyes widening in fear. She rushed toward the back, her heart pounding, only to see a flicker of light in the darkness. Mark stood there with a lit match, his eyes wild, and whispered, "If I can't have you, Anna, no one will." The match dropped from Mark's hand, its tiny flame kissing the trail of gasoline with a hiss. In an instant, fire roared to life, racing along the walls of the restaurant like a living beast unleashed from its cage. The crackle of burning wood filled the air as orange light exploded against the night sky. Anna gasped, her hands instinctively covering her belly. Heat rushed toward her, stealing her breath, and smoke coiled upward, filling her lungs. Panic surged, but so did the will to protect her unborn child. "No, no, not like this," she whispered hoarsely, stumbling back into the restaurant. Mark stood outside, his face twisted in satisfaction, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "You brought this on yourself, Anna. You ruined me, and now you'll burn with your precious little dream." Anna's fear turned into fury. She screamed through the smoke, her voice cracking. "You're a monster, Mark, but I won't let you destroy me, or my baby." She turned and ran deeper into the restaurant, searching for a way out as the fire consumed everything around her. The heat was unbearable, searing her skin as she shielded her belly with her arms. Flames devoured the curtains, climbed the wooden beams, and shattered glass with violent pops. Each step felt like walking through an inferno, the smoke blinding her vision. She coughed violently, her throat raw, her chest tightening. The front door was already blocked by falling debris. The exit in the kitchen was her only chance. She staggered toward it, her legs trembling under the weight of both her body and the baby inside her. But just as she reached the doorway, a beam crashed down, blocking her path with a wall of fire. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with soot. "Please, please God, don't let my baby die like this," she begged, her voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. She pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling a faint kick. That tiny movement reminded her she wasn't just fighting for herself. With every ounce of strength, Anna grabbed a metal chair and slammed it against the burning debris, carving a narrow gap. Her palms burned, her lungs screamed for air, but she pushed forward. "Hold on, baby, just hold on." Outside, neighbors gathered, shouting in horror as the restaurant turned into a blazing furnace. Someone screamed for water, another for the fire department. But amid the chaos, James's car screeched to a halt. He leapt out, his heart nearly stopping at the sight of the inferno. "Anna!" he shouted desperately, pushing through the crowd. His eyes scanned the windows, searching for her. Through the smoke, he saw a faint silhouette moving, stumbling, fighting against the fire. Without hesitation, James rushed toward the flames, ignoring the hands that tried to stop him. "She's in there!" he yelled. "I won't let her die." Inside, Anna's strength began to fail. She collapsed to her knees, coughing violently, her vision spinning. The heat was overwhelming, her body screaming for relief. She whispered one last prayer, her voice broken. "Save my baby, please." And just as her eyes fluttered shut, strong arms lifted her from the ground, carrying her through the smoke, but the fire roared louder, threatening to consume them both. James's arms tightened around Anna's frail body as he staggered through the smoke-filled restaurant. The flames clawed at him from every side, searing his skin, but he held her close, shielding her belly with his own body. Her head rested limply against his chest, her breath shallow, her skin hot from the fire. "Stay with me, Anna," he shouted, though his throat burned from the smoke. "Don't you dare give up now." The crack of wood collapsing echoed above them. A burning beam crashed down just inches from where he stood, sparks showering his back. James gritted his teeth, pushing forward, his eyes locked on the faint glow of the back door through the haze. But every step was harder. The air was thick, suffocating. Flames roared like angry demons, trying to swallow them whole. James's vision blurred, his chest heaving, yet he forced himself to keep moving. He wasn't just carrying Anna, he was carrying her unborn child, their fragile future. Outside, the crowd screamed as the fire intensified. Neighbors waved frantically at the windows, some crying, others praying. "Please, God, let them make it out," one whispered. At the back of the restaurant, the exit was almost blocked by fallen debris. James lowered Anna gently to the ground and grabbed a broken chair, smashing at the burning wood. His hands blistered, sweat and soot dripping down his face, but he didn't stop. Anna stirred faintly, her eyes fluttering open. "James?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He dropped the chair and knelt beside her, gripping her hand. "I'm here. You're safe. Just hold on a little longer." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached weakly for her belly. "The baby, save the baby." James's heart broke. "Both of you. I'm saving both of you." With one final push, he cleared enough space for them to squeeze through. He lifted Anna again, his muscles screaming in protest, and charged toward the opening. The flames licked at his back, the heat unbearable, but then, Fresh air hit his face. The crowd erupted in gasps as James emerged from the inferno, carrying Anna in his arms like a broken angel. Her hair was singed, her dress torn, her skin streaked with soot, but she was alive. "Call the ambulance again," someone shouted. James collapsed to his knees, laying Anna gently on the cool pavement. He cupped her face with trembling hands. "You're out. You're safe now." Anna coughed violently, her chest heaving as she gulped in the night air. Tears streaked through the soot on her cheeks. She looked at James, her lips trembling. You saved us." Emotion tightened his throat. "No, Anna, you saved yourself. You found the strength to fight. I just helped you out." The fire raged behind them, consuming the last of her restaurant, her years of labor, her one refuge. Anna turned her head weakly, watching the flames devour everything she had built. Her heart ached, but strangely, she felt lighter. For the first time, she wasn't tied down by fear or silence. But the moment of relief shattered when a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Mark." He stood at the edge of the crowd, his face blackened with soot, his eyes blazing with madness. "You think this is over, Anna?" he snarled. "I'm not done with you yet." And before anyone could stop him, Mark pulled something from his coat, aiming it straight at James. The crowd gasped as Mark pulled a gun from his coat, his hands trembling, but his aim steady enough to strike. His face was twisted with desperation, madness burning in his eyes. He shouted above the chaos, "If I can't have her, then no one will. And you?" His eyes locked on James. "You'll be the first to go." Anna's scream pierced the night. "No, Mark, stop!" She tried to push herself up, but her body was too weak. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out helplessly. James rose slowly, positioning himself between Anna and the weapon, his voice calm but firm. "Put it down, Mark. You've lost. It's over. Don't throw away the last shred of your life." But Mark's hand shook violently, his pride wounded beyond repair. "No, she ruined me. She made me a joke. And you think you're her hero? You think you can take everything from me?" His finger tightened on the trigger. The crowd screamed, some ducking, others frozen in fear. Police officers raised their guns, shouting commands. "Drop the weapon! Drop it now!" For a tense second, it seemed Mark might fire anyway. But his madness had blinded him to reality. The officers surrounding him, their guns trained on his chest, their voices commanding. Anna's sobs broke through the noise. "Please, Mark, don't do this. Haven't you done enough?" For the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or the memory of who he once was. But it was gone in an instant, swallowed by rage. He let out a roar and raised the gun higher. The sound of gunfire split the air. But it wasn't his weapon that fired. Mark staggered, his eyes wide in shock before crumpling to the ground. The police had shot first, ending his rampage before he could take another life. The gun slid from his hand, clattering uselessly against the pavement. The crowd exhaled collectively, relief and horror mixing in the night air. Anna covered her mouth with trembling hands, sobbing uncontrollably. James rushed to her side, holding her close, whispering, "It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." Paramedics moved quickly, covering Mark's body and checking on Anna. One of them smiled reassuringly. "Your baby's heartbeat is strong. You're safe now." Those words broke the dam inside her. Anna wept openly, clutching James's hand. For the first time in years, her tears weren't from fear or humiliation. They were from release. Days later, Anna stood outside the ashes of her restaurant. The building was gone, but she didn't feel broken anymore. She placed a flower on the ground where Mr. Johnson had fallen, whispering, "I kept my promise. I'm alive, and my baby will live free." James stood beside her, his arm protective around her shoulders. "This isn't the end, Anna. It's the beginning. We'll build something new, stronger, brighter, together." Anna looked at him, her eyes shining with quiet strength. "For so long I thought I was powerless, but now I know. I was never weak. I just needed to remember who I was." She placed a hand on her belly, smiling through her tears. "And who I'll be, for my child." As the sun rose behind them, painting the sky with light, the town whispered not of scandal, but of survival, of courage, of rebirth. And Anna, once the silent, suffering wife, finally stepped into her new life. Free, fearless, and unbreakable. So my wonderful friends, that's how this story comes to a close. If you're still here with me, it must mean something in Anna's journey touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when you felt powerless, or maybe it gave you hope that healing is always possible. As the Stoics say, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. Anna lived in fear for years, but when she chose courage over silence, she discovered her true strength. Life will test us, but we are never defined by our suffering. We are defined by how we rise after it. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need strength today, and don't forget to subscribe so we can walk through more stories of hope together. Remember, no matter how heavy the night feels, the sun always rises again. The screech of metal tore through the underground station as the subway roared into view. Commuters shuffled along the yellow line, lost in their own worlds, clutching coffee cups and bags of groceries. The air was thick with that familiar mix of oil, sweat, and the faint echo of street musicians playing somewhere above. And then, in one terrifying instant, everything shattered. Emily Tran, 6 months pregnant, stood near the edge of the platform with her husband, Damien. Her hands rested protectively on her swollen belly, her eyes tired but still filled with hope that maybe, just maybe, the man beside her could change. For months, Damien had grown colder, crueler, whispering to his mistress on late-night calls, snapping at Emily for being weak and useless. But tonight, he had insisted they go out. She thought maybe it was a step toward reconciliation. She was wrong. Damien's jaw tightened as the headlights of the approaching train lit up the tunnel. His eyes, once warm and charming, now burned with something darker: impatience, disgust, and a chilling resolve. Leaning close, he hissed words only Emily could hear. "You've been nothing but a burden. Tonight, it ends." Before she could even gasp, his hand slammed into her shoulder with brutal force. The world flipped upside down. Emily's scream sliced through the crowded platform as her body toppled forward, weightless for a split second before she hit the gravel bed of the tracks. Pain exploded through her leg as the train's horn blared. The crowd erupted in chaos, shouts, gasps, frantic pointing fingers. Blood spread across the concrete like spilled paint. "Help her! Someone help her!" a woman shrieked, her voice breaking. The train was seconds away. Sparks lit the tunnel as brakes screeched, but there was no time. Emily clawed at the rails, her nails breaking, tears blinding her. She thought of her baby, the tiny heartbeat she'd heard during checkups, the promise of a future she still dreamed of. "Please, not like this," she whispered through clenched teeth. In that horrifying blur, her left leg twisted under the weight of steel. A sickening crunch echoed, followed by a scream that seemed to silence the entire station. Blood gushed, soaking her dress, pooling beneath her. Strangers covered their mouths, children cried, phones recorded the nightmare. Emily's vision dimmed, her ears ringing, but inside her belly, she felt it. Her baby kicked. Still alive. Still fighting. Just when the shadows threatened to swallow her, a pair of strong hands reached down from above. A man's voice, firm and steady, cut through the panic. "Hold on. Don't let go." His suit jacket brushed against the dirt as he leaned dangerously close to the rails. His grip locked onto her arm with the kind of strength that refused to surrender. The train thundered past, sparks flying, the gust of wind nearly tearing him off balance. Emily's body convulsed in pain, her leg mangled, her dress drenched in red. She tried to focus on the face above her. Sharp jawline, kind but determined eyes, a stranger who felt like hope itself. Her lips trembled, her breath shallow. The last thing she heard before slipping into unconsciousness was his voice, trembling with urgency. "You're safe now. I've got you." Long before the blood and the chaos at the subway station, Emily Tran had believed her life was a fairy tale. At 29, she carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who found joy in the simplest things. A teacher at a neighborhood elementary school in Queens, she was adored by her students, who clung to her like a second mother. She had no designer wardrobe, no family fortune, no glamorous circle of friends. What she did have was a heart full of kindness, a determination to work hard, and the dream of raising a child in a loving home. When Emily first met Damien Tran 7 years earlier, she thought fate had finally rewarded her. He was everything she wasn't: confident, wealthy, and magnetic. He owned property across the city, drove sleek cars, and carried the aura of a man who could bend the world to his will. Damien swept her off her feet with extravagant gestures. Lavish dinners, roses arriving at her school, promises whispered beneath glittering city lights. For a girl raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a seamstress, the attention felt intoxicating. Her friends warned her. They told her Damien was too good to be true, that men with money often loved control more than people. But Emily, blinded by the fantasy, clung to the belief that love could change even the hardest heart. Within a year, she was married. Within 2, she was dreaming of children, imagining a cozy home filled with laughter and warmth. At first, their marriage glowed. Damien showed up at her classroom with coffee, teased her gently when she fell asleep grading papers, and held her hand during long walks in Central Park. She told herself she had beaten the odds. She wasn't just a schoolteacher married to a millionaire. She was proof that love transcended class, background, and status. But as years passed, shadows crept in. Damien's business empire expanded, and with it his arrogance. He stopped asking about her day. He began criticizing the way she dressed, the way she ate, even the way she spoke. At first, Emily brushed it off, convincing herself that stress was making him harsh. But deep down, she knew the man she had married was slipping away. When she discovered she was pregnant, her heart leapt with joy. For a brief moment, Damien seemed thrilled too. He told her he would be a father their child could look up to. He even kissed her stomach and whispered promises of building a future together. Emily clung to those moments, desperate to believe he meant them. Yet the reality was crueler. Damien grew distant, staying out late, making excuses about business dinners. Emily smelled perfume on his suits. Perfume that wasn't hers. She found suspicious credit card charges at luxury boutiques she had never set foot in. When she confronted him, he dismissed her, accusing her of being paranoid. "You should focus on your pregnancy," he snapped. "Leave business to men who understand it." Alone in their penthouse, Emily often pressed her hands against her belly, whispering to her unborn child that everything would be okay. She didn't care about wealth or status. She only wanted love, stability, and safety for her baby. She still prayed Damien would change. But deep inside, she felt the growing chill of a storm she could no longer control. And soon, that storm would break in the most brutal way imaginable. And that night at the subway, it finally did. To the outside world, Damien Tran was the definition of success. At 37, he was the kind of man who drew attention the second he entered a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sleek black hair and a tailored suit that hugged his frame like it had been cut from ambition itself, Damien carried the aura of a conqueror. Reporters called him a self-made real estate king. Investors praised his ruthless instincts. Young entrepreneurs idolized his story of climbing from nothing to everything. But those who looked closer, those who dared, could see cracks beneath the polished surface. Damien had built his empire on charm, manipulation, and fear. He was the type of man who smiled warmly for cameras, then shredded his employees behind closed doors. The boardroom was his battlefield, and his opponents rarely left unscathed. He thrived on control, on bending people until they broke, then discarding them like old receipts. When Emily first met him, she saw only the charm. Damien knew how to sell himself, not just to investors, but to anyone he wanted. He wooed her with grand gestures because he understood her innocence, her desire for love. For Damien, it wasn't just about attraction, it was about power. Having a humble school teacher on his arm was proof that he could claim anything, anyone, regardless of background. It made him feel invincible. As his fortune grew, so did his hunger. Luxury became his language. A new penthouse overlooking Central Park, imported cars with custom interiors, vacations on private yachts. Each possession fed his ego, but nothing ever satisfied him. Emily, once a jewel he flaunted proudly, began to bore him. She didn't understand the thrill of high-stakes deals, the intoxicating power of being envied. To him, her kindness became weakness, her modesty became shame. He never said it outright at first, but his disdain slipped through in barbed comments. "You should dress better if you're going to be seen with me. Maybe if you earned more, you'd understand the value of money. Stop eating so much. You don't want to embarrass me at events." Each insult chipped away at Emily, but Damien delivered them with a casual cruelty that made them sound like truths rather than attacks. Behind Emily's back, Damien had already moved on. Roxanne, a 25-year-old intern at his firm, was everything Emily wasn't: glamorous, ambitious, eager to please. She clung to Damien's side at business functions, laughing at his jokes, fueling his ego with every glance of admiration. With Roxanne, Damien felt younger, more powerful, like a man still climbing, rather than one weighed down by responsibility. But it wasn't enough to cheat. Damien wanted freedom. Freedom from Emily, from fatherhood, from the domestic life he had once pretended to cherish. In his mind, Emily's pregnancy wasn't a blessing. It was a chain that threatened to trap him in a role he despised. And Damien Tran was not a man who tolerated chains. As his obsession with Roxanne deepened, his contempt for Emily grew unbearable. He started plotting in silence, searching for a way to rid himself of the burden without tarnishing his reputation. And when the moment came on that subway platform, Damien didn't hesitate. He pushed. What he didn't expect was that fate had already chosen a witness who would change everything. At first, Emily tried to ignore the unease gnawing at her heart. She told herself that Damien was stressed, that the late nights and sharp words were temporary, that once the baby arrived, things would change. But denial could only hold back reality for so long. The signs of betrayal were everywhere, carved into her days like cruel reminders that the man she loved was slipping further away. It began with the small lies. Damien would tell her he had urgent meetings, yet Emily would find receipts from luxury restaurants tucked into his suit pockets, meals for two, not one. She discovered lipstick smudges on his collars, faint but undeniable, shades she never wore. Once, when she reached for his phone, Damien snatched it away with such ferocity that her hands shook for hours afterward. The emotional abuse grew sharper with each passing week. "Why are you still wearing those cheap clothes?" he sneered one evening, glancing at her modest maternity dress. "Do you want people to think I can't provide for my wife?" Another time, when she gently reminded him of her prenatal appointment, he rolled his eyes. "You're so needy, Emily. All you do is complain. No wonder I stay late at work." Her heart cracked, but she stayed silent. She told herself she had to be strong for the baby, that confronting him would only make things worse. But silence became suffocating. Emily started crying quietly at night, muffling her sobs into pillows so Damien wouldn't hear, or worse, mock her for them. Then came the cruelest blow. Emily walked into Damien's office one afternoon to surprise him with lunch, her belly leading the way, her hands full of his favorite food. The secretary froze, her face pale, as if she had been guarding a secret. Emily pushed open the door and saw her husband leaning close to Roxanne, his hand brushing against the young woman's arm, their smiles too intimate to be professional. Roxanne's perfume lingered in the air like poison. "Emily," Damien said flatly, as though caught in nothing more than a boring meeting, "you shouldn't be here." Her heart collapsed inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words died on her tongue. She looked at Roxanne, who smirked ever so slightly, as if daring Emily to challenge her. The humiliation was unbearable. Without a word, Emily placed the lunch on his desk, her hands trembling, and walked out. That night, Damien didn't bother coming home until dawn. When he finally did, he smelled of cologne and champagne. "Don't start," he muttered when Emily tried to ask where he had been. "You're lucky I keep a roof over your head. Stop acting like some abandoned housewife." Those words cut deeper than any knife. For the first time, Emily began to understand the truth. Damien didn't just stop loving her, he despised her. And in his eyes, their baby wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. Still, Emily whispered to her unborn child as she lay awake in the dark, "I'll protect you, no matter what, even if I have to face this storm alone." She had no idea how violent that storm was about to become. The night of their wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. Emily had circled the date on her calendar, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Damien would remember the promises he had once whispered to her under the glow of city lights. She bought a soft blue dress, nothing extravagant, just elegant enough to make her feel like the woman she used to be. She imagined walking into a candlelit dinner, Damien smiling, perhaps even apologizing for his recent cruelty. Instead, she was left sitting alone in their penthouse, staring at the clock as hours bled away. The dinner reservation she had made sat unused. The flowers she had placed on the table wilted in silence. At nearly midnight, Damien returned, not with an apology, but with a smirk. "You should have known I had business tonight," he said dismissively. Don't act like a child." He didn't even look at her belly, didn't even acknowledge the life they had created together. The next morning, Emily saw the photographs online. Damien had attended the city's most exclusive charity gala, an event where the wealthy gathered under chandeliers worth more than Emily's annual salary. But the worst wasn't that he went without her. The worst was who he chose to bring. Roxanne. There she was, glittering in a crimson gown, her hand curled possessively around Damien's arm. They looked like royalty, laughing as camera flashes immortalized their intimacy. The articles praised them as a striking pair, whispering about a possible engagement. Emily's stomach turned as she scrolled through the images, her trembling hand resting over her unborn child. She could almost hear the whispers of society. The millionaire's wife, replaced, discarded, humiliated. When Damien returned home the next day, Emily confronted him. "How could you?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry the weight of her heartbreak. "How could you take her to a gala on our anniversary?" Damien barely glanced at her. "Don't be dramatic. You wouldn't have fit in anyway. You're swollen, exhausted, always complaining. Roxanne knows how to carry herself. She doesn't embarrass me." The words hit Emily like daggers. She pressed a hand to her belly, as if shielding her baby from the venom. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. "I loved you," she whispered. "I gave you everything." Damien laughed coldly. "And what did I get in return? A nagging wife and a pregnancy I never wanted. Be grateful I let you stay in this house." Emily turned away, unable to bear the sight of him. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just unloved. She was despised. Her marriage wasn't simply broken. It was a cage, and Damien was tightening the bars every day. That night, as she lay awake, Emily felt her baby kick, a tiny reminder that life still beat inside her. She kissed her stomach and made a silent vow. "I'll endure this pain for you, but one day he will pay." She didn't know that payment would come sooner than anyone expected. The night was cold, the kind of biting chill that seeped into bones and made even the brightest lights of the city seem dimmer. Emily walked beside Damien, her steps unsteady, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She didn't understand why he had insisted they take the subway instead of the chauffeured car waiting outside their building. He had barked something about being in a hurry, but his jaw was clenched too tightly, his fists shoved too deep into his pockets for her to believe it. The platform was crowded, alive with the restless energy of New Yorkers rushing home. The rumble of an approaching train echoed in the tunnel, the vibration rattling the tiles under Emily's feet. She tried to keep her balance, holding the railing for support. Her pregnancy made her body heavy, her legs tired, and Damien offered no hand, no word of care. He strode ahead, his pace sharp, almost impatient, as if her very existence was slowing him down. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, can we just go home? I'm exhausted. The baby." "The baby?" He cut her off with a bitter laugh, turning to glare at her. His voice was low, dangerous, carrying the venom he no longer bothered to hide. "That's all I hear from you. The baby this, the baby that. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I ever wanted to be chained to a crying brat and a wife who looks like she crawled out of a bargain store?" Emily's heart cracked. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "How can you say that? This is our child. Flesh and blood. Damien, please." But his face was a mask of hatred, twisted by years of contempt. He leaned in close, his whisper slicing through the noise of the platform. "You ruined me, Emily. Do you hear me? You ruined everything. I could have had freedom, power. Roxanne understands me. You're just a burden." The words cut deeper than any blade. Emily stepped back instinctively, clutching her belly, her body trembling with fear. The train's headlights appeared in the tunnel, a blinding glow that grew larger with each passing second. The crowd shifted closer to the yellow line, eager to board. Emily tried to move away, but Damien's hand clamped around her arm, his grip iron, his eyes burning with something terrifying. "Damien, you're hurting me," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "Please, not here. Not now." The roar of the train grew deafening. The ground shook. Emily's breath quickened, her pulse pounding in her ears. She tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. "I should have gotten rid of you a long time ago," he spat. "Tonight, I will." Her stomach lurched. She gasped, her eyes wide with horror. Around them the crowd laughed, shouted, oblivious to the war unfolding between husband and wife. The train surged closer, its brakes screeching, sparks flying as it tore through the tunnel. Damien shoved her toward the edge, his strength merciless. Emily's scream pierced the air as her body stumbled forward. And then, in that split second before the train swallowed her, everything changed. The world spun as Emily fell forward, her scream ripping through the underground station. The force of Damien's shove sent her sprawling onto the tracks, gravel tearing at her skin as the deafening roar of the subway thundered closer. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to freeze. The gasps of bystanders, the flicker of horror on strangers' faces, the blinding light of the train bearing down on her. Emily's body hit the ground hard. She twisted, instinctively shielding her stomach with her arms. Her mind wasn't on herself. It was on the tiny life kicking inside her, desperate to survive. "Please," she whispered through trembling lips, though her plea was drowned out by the screeching brakes and metal grinding against metal. And then it happened. The train clipped her leg, crushing bone and flesh in a single merciless strike. The sound was sickening, a crack followed by a gush of blood that spread across the tracks like a crimson river. Emily's scream was so raw, so piercing, that the entire platform seemed to fall silent. Mothers covered their children's eyes, grown men turned away, and still the blood poured, pooling beneath her like a horrific painting. Emily clawed at the rails, her nails breaking, her face pale and drenched in sweat. Pain like fire shot through her body, but through it all she felt the faint, miraculous kick inside her womb. Her baby was still alive. That knowledge became her anchor, her reason to cling to consciousness as darkness threatened to pull her under. Above her, chaos erupted. "Call 911, someone shouted. "Get her out of there." Another voice, panicked and helpless, cried, "She's losing too much blood." Dozens of phones pointed down, some recording, others shaking as desperate fingers dialed for help. Damien stood frozen on the platform, his face a mask of shock. For once, his arrogance deserted him. He glanced around, realizing that dozens of witnesses had seen what he had done. His lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. He slowly backed into the crowd, trying to disappear into the chaos, but it was too late. Eyes were on him, and whispers had already begun. And then, from the blur of screaming voices and flashing lights, one man acted. He wasn't just any man. He wore a navy suit that now brushed against the filthy platform tiles as he threw himself to the ground. His strong hands reached down, his voice booming with authority. "Grab my arm. Don't you dare let go." Emily blinked through the haze of pain, her vision swimming. A face came into focus. Sharp jawline, steady eyes filled not with pity, but with determination. He radiated calm in the storm, his grip firm and unyielding. She clung to him with the last of her strength. The train shuddered to a stop, sparks flying, smoke rising in the tunnel. The stranger pulled with all his might, muscles straining, refusing to surrender her to death. Inch by inch, Emily's broken body lifted from the blood-soaked tracks. The crowd roared encouragement, a chorus of voices willing her to survive. As her body collapsed onto the platform, her head rested against the stranger's chest. Her eyes fluttered, her lips moving weakly. "You're safe now?" he whispered, his voice trembling but certain. And just before darkness swallowed her, Emily realized this man had just changed her life forever. The beeping of machines was the first sound Emily heard. Slow, steady, relentless, like the faint reminder that she was still tethered to life. The smell of antiseptic filled her lungs, sharp and sterile, so different from the chaos of the subway. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy as stone, and she found herself in a white hospital room. The lights dimmed, the curtains pulled halfway shut against the night. For a moment she couldn't remember. Then it hit her. The shove, the scream, the blood, the agony that tore her apart. She gasped, panic flooding her chest as her hands flew to her stomach. Was the baby? A nurse rushed to her side, pressing a gentle hand against hers. "Your baby's alive," she said softly. "Strong heartbeat. You saved them." Relief crashed over Emily, tears streaming down her cheeks. But just as quickly, another realization sank in. She tried to move her legs. One responded weakly. The other? Nothing. She forced her gaze downward and her heart shattered into pieces. The space where her left leg should have been was gone, replaced by bandages, tubes, and the harsh reality of survival. She let out a cry so raw, so broken that even the nurse had to look away. No, no, God, no. Her hands shook violently as she covered her face, the weight of it crushing her spirit. She had survived, but she wasn't whole anymore. As her sobs echoed in the room, a deep voice spoke from the corner. You are whole, Emily. You're alive, and your child is alive. That's what matters. Her head snapped up. The man from the subway stood there, his navy suit now wrinkled, his tie loosened, but his presence steady and commanding. His eyes carried both exhaustion and something else, something fierce, protective. You, she whispered, her voice trembling. You saved me, he nodded, stepping closer. Alexander Blackwell. I couldn't stand by and watch. You fought harder than anyone I've ever seen. Emily shook her head, her tears soaking the pillow. I lost my leg. I'll never be the same. Damien, she choked on the name, unable to say more. Alexander's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. I saw what he did. Everyone did. There were witnesses, cameras. He won't get away with this, not this time. His voice was steady, but beneath it lay a promise, a vow of justice. The nurse adjusted Emily's IV and quietly slipped out, leaving them alone. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of machines and Emily's uneven breaths. She turned her face toward Alexander, her eyes filled with both gratitude and despair. Why are you still here? She asked softly. Because you need someone, he replied without hesitation. And because no one deserves to fight alone. Not you, not your baby. Her chest tightened. For the first time in months, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Safety. The way Alexander looked at her wasn't with pity, it was with respect, with belief. Emily closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. She had lost so much, but maybe, just maybe, life had given her a second chance. And as Alexander stood by her side, she had no idea how much he was about to change her destiny. The hospital became both a refuge and a prison. Days blurred together in a haze of pain, medicine, and muffled sobs. Emily tried to be strong, but the reality of her loss clawed at her every waking moment. Each time she looked down at the empty space where her leg once was, grief tore through her like fresh glass, cutting skin. Physical therapy was brutal. The first time a nurse sat her up in bed, pain shot through her body so violently she nearly fainted. Sweat drenched her forehead as she tried to balance, her arms trembling from the effort. You have to fight, the therapist encouraged gently. But Emily could barely hear her over the roaring in her ears. All she could think was, I'm broken. I'm ruined. Damien has won. The nights were the worst. Alone in the dimly lit room, she would press her hands to her swollen belly and cry silently so the nurses wouldn't hear. She worried endlessly. What kind of mother could she be now? How could she protect her child when she couldn't even walk? And worse, what if Damien tried to take the baby from her? The thought made her chest tighten until she couldn't breathe. Yet through the shadows, one constant presence remained. Alexander Blackwell. He came every day, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with books, but always with quiet strength. He didn't push her to talk. He simply sat by her bed, reading the newspaper or answering emails, as if his presence alone was enough to remind her she wasn't alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the hospital walls in muted gold, Emily broke down. Why are you wasting your time on me? She whispered, her voice cracking. Look at me. I'm nothing now. Damien destroyed me. Alexander leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. You are not nothing. You survived something that would have killed most people. And you saved your child in the process. That makes you stronger than Damien will ever be. His words lodged deep in her heart. For the first time since the accident, she let herself believe. Maybe she wasn't ruined. Maybe she was still worth something. What Emily didn't know was that Alexander was doing more than sitting at her bedside. Behind the scenes, he was pulling strings, hiring private investigators, gathering evidence. The subway incident had been caught on surveillance cameras. Witnesses had already given statements. But Alexander wanted more. He wanted to expose every dirty secret Damien had buried, from financial fraud to the affair with Roxanne. Late at night, while Emily slept, Alexander met with lawyers and detectives. This man tried to kill her, he said coldly. I want everything. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. We're going to bury him with the truth. In her hospital room, Emily stirred in her sleep, unaware of the storm brewing outside. She clutched her belly, murmuring softly to the child growing inside her, as if promising them a better future. She didn't yet know that Alexander's vow was more than just justice. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that would shatter the chains Damien had forged around her life. And soon, Emily would rise from her darkest hours stronger than ever. The rain poured outside the hospital windows, streaking the glass like tears from the heavens. Emily sat upright in her bed, her face pale but her eyes sharper than before. She had endured days of agony, both physical and emotional, but a fire flickered quietly inside her now. Still, uncertainty gnawed at her. Damien was out there, free, untouchable. She knew him well enough to understand he wouldn't rest until he had erased her completely. That night, Alexander entered her room, not with flowers or gentle smiles, but with a folder in his hand. He closed the door behind him, his expression heavy with something he had been holding back. Emily looked up, her heart skipping at the unusual seriousness in his gaze. "Emily," he began, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "There's something you need to know. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but you deserve the truth." Her brows furrowed. "The truth?" He placed the folder on her lap. Inside were clippings from newspapers, photos of gala events, articles from Forbes, glossy covers of financial magazines. Each bore the same name, Alexander Blackwell. Emily blinked, stunned. This can't be." "It is," Alexander said softly. "I'm not just some man who happened to be at that station. I'm the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises. I've built hospitals, funded schools, invested billions into charities around the world. But money means nothing compared to this." He leaned forward, his voice dropping, steady and raw. "Compared to saving you, compared to making sure you and your child are safe." Her lips parted in disbelief. All this time, she had thought he was simply a kind stranger, a man with compassion. She never imagined he was one of the wealthiest men in the country. "Why? Why me?" she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Because I saw something in you," Alexander said firmly. "The way you fought for your baby, even while bleeding on those tracks. The strength in your eyes when everyone else would have given up. That's real power, Emily. That's something money can't buy. And no man, certainly not Damien, has the right to break it." Emily's chest heaved, emotions swirling between gratitude, disbelief, and fear. "But Damien, he'll come for me. He won't stop until..." "Until what?" Alexander cut in, his eyes burning with resolve. "Until he silences you? Not anymore. I've already set lawyers in motion. I've secured a private team to protect you, and I will not rest until Damien Tran is stripped of everything he used to hurt you." For the first time since the accident, Emily felt the heavy chains of fear loosen. Alexander wasn't just offering comfort, he was offering armor. He was giving her a way to rise, to fight, to reclaim her dignity. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Alexander shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. Don't give up. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning." Emily's hand drifted to her belly, feeling the faint kick of life inside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future. And with Alexander Blackwell at her side, that future would be nothing short of extraordinary. The first day of rehabilitation felt like stepping into another battlefield. Emily sat in the therapy room, her hospital gown replaced by soft athletic wear, her hair tied back, her face pale but determined. The physical therapist wheeled in a set of parallel bars, placing them in front of her. "Are you ready to try standing?" the therapist asked gently. Emily swallowed hard. She looked down at her bandaged stump, then at her swollen belly. The thought of standing, of walking again, felt impossible. But then she remembered Alexander's words. "Don't give up. Your story isn't over." Slowly she nodded. With trembling arms she gripped the bars. Sweat broke across her forehead as she shifted her weight, her muscles straining. For a moment her body refused. Then, inch by inch, she rose. The pain was excruciating, tears streaming down her cheeks, but when she finally stood upright on one leg, a flicker of triumph lit her eyes. Alexander was there, watching quietly from the corner of the room. He didn't cheer or clap. Instead, he simply smiled, his gaze steady and full of respect. "That's the strongest thing I've ever seen," he murmured. Day after day, Emily pushed herself. She fell, she cried, she screamed in frustration when her body betrayed her. But each time she stood again. The therapists encouraged her, but it was Alexander's presence that gave her strength. He showed up without fail, sometimes in a crisp suit after business meetings, sometimes in casual clothes with takeout bags in his hands. He was never intrusive, never overbearing. He was simply there. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Emily collapsed into her wheelchair, her body shaking with exhaustion. "I can't do this," she whispered, covering her face. "I'm useless." Damien was right. Who would ever want someone like me? Alexander crouched down in front of her, gently lowering her hands from her face. "Don't you dare believe his lies. You're not useless, Emily. You're unstoppable. Look at what you've survived. Look at the child you're carrying. Damien's words don't define you. Your courage does." His voice was so steady, so fierce, that Emily's heart trembled. For the first time she allowed herself to meet his eyes fully. In them she didn't see pity. She saw admiration. She saw belief. And it made her want to believe too. Weeks turned into months. Emily learned to maneuver with crutches, her body growing stronger each day. Her pregnancy progressed, and with every kick she felt inside her belly, her determination deepened. She would not let Damien's cruelty define her child's future. She would not be the broken woman he tried to leave behind. One afternoon, Alexander arrived with something that made her breath catch. A custom-designed prosthetic leg. Sleek, modern, crafted with care. "It's yours," he said softly, "when you're ready." Emily touched it with trembling fingers, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked. Alexander's gaze softened. "Because you deserve to know what it feels like to be valued, to be truly seen." Her heart skipped. She wasn't ready to admit what she felt stirring inside her. But as she looked at him, she knew one truth with absolute certainty. For the first time in years, she was no longer alone. For weeks after the subway incident, Damien tried to act as though nothing had happened. He polished his image, smiled for reporters, and tightened his grip on his company. But beneath the glossy surface, cracks began to spread like spiderwebs across glass. And once they appeared, there was no stopping the collapse. The first blow came quietly. A subpoena landed on his desk one morning, thick with legal weight. Damien ripped it open, his jaw tightening as he read. Charges of attempted murder, assault, and financial fraud. The subway's surveillance cameras had captured everything. The shove, Emily's fall, his cold retreat into the crowd. Witnesses had come forward, and not just strangers. One was a respected city official who had seen the entire thing. Damien's name was no longer whispered with admiration in boardrooms. It was hissed in disgust. At first, he dismissed it. Money fixes everything, he told himself, pacing the marble floors of his penthouse. Judges can be bought. Lawyers can spin a story. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at his confidence. Because this time, the story wasn't just about numbers. It was about blood, about a pregnant woman, about a child who had almost died. The public outrage was deafening. Then came the second blow. Roxanne. She had once been his comfort, his escape from responsibility, the woman who stroked his ego and laughed at his cruel jokes. But as the lawsuits piled up, she grew distant. She stopped answering his calls, stopped showing up at his apartment. When she did appear, her tone was sharp, her eyes calculating. "I didn't sign up for this," she snapped one night, tossing her designer purse onto his sofa. "Do you know what people are saying about me? They call me the mistress of a murderer. Do you think that looks good on my resume?" Damien's temper flared. "After everything I gave you, the clothes, the jewelry, the trips, you ungrateful little—" "Don't," she cut him off, her voice icy. "Don't forget, Damien. I know everything. I know about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the money you laundered to hide your gambling debts. If you drag me down, I'll drag you down with me." Her words struck him harder than any courtroom threat. Roxanne, the woman he thought he controlled, was slipping from his grasp. And worse, she held weapons of her own. The third blow came in whispers. Investors began pulling out. Deals collapsed overnight. Newspapers ran headlines like "Millionaire Monster," "Damien Tran's Fall from Grace." Protesters gathered outside his office, chanting for justice. Once loyal employees leaked stories of his cruelty, his corruption, his arrogance. His empire, built on intimidation and lies, was turning to ash in his hands. Alone in his penthouse, Damien poured himself a glass of scotch, staring out at the glittering skyline. His reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, the mask of a man cornered. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't control. Fear. Because somewhere out there, Emily was still alive. And the stranger who had pulled her from the tracks, Alexander Blackwell, was a name Damien could no longer ignore. The war between them had only just begun. The first time Emily wheeled herself to the hospital nursery, her heart pounded harder than it ever had. Behind the glass, newborns slept peacefully, wrapped in soft blankets, their tiny fists curled as if holding on to the promise of life itself. Emily pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the familiar kicks. Her child wasn't here yet, but soon she would hold them. And that thought gave her strength unlike anything she had ever known. For weeks, she had lived in shadows, grieving her leg, mourning the woman she thought she had lost. But slowly, she began to realize that survival had given her something Damien never could. Freedom. She no longer had to please him. She no longer had to shrink herself to fit inside his cruel world. She had endured his worst, and yet here she was, alive, carrying a child, and beginning again. The hospital staff began to notice the change. She smiled more often, laughed quietly when nurses teased her, and embraced the grind of therapy with renewed determination. Each step she took on her prosthetic leg, though shaky and painful, felt like a victory. Each tear she shed on the therapy mat wasn't just grief, it was release. Alexander saw it too. He had watched her break, and now he watched her rebuild. Every day, his admiration deepened. It wasn't her tragedy that moved him, it was her resilience. He found himself drawn not just to her courage, but to the warmth she carried, even in her brokenness. She would ask about his day, tease him when he looked too serious, and thank him for the smallest gestures, as though they were gifts beyond measure. One evening, after a long therapy session, Emily sat in her wheelchair by the hospital garden. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh flowers. Alexander joined her, 2 steaming cups of tea in his hands. He passed one to her, and for a moment they simply sat in silence. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "Every day," he replied. "But the future isn't about what I build anymore. It's about who I build it with." His eyes softened as he looked at her. Emily's heart skipped, but she shook her head gently. "I can't think about that right now. My focus has to be on this baby." Alexander nodded. "And that's exactly why I'm here, to make sure you never have to do it alone." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. For so long she had begged Damien for partnership, for kindness, for love. Now, sitting beside Alexander, she realized she no longer had to beg. She was worthy of it all along. As the night deepened, she whispered to her unborn child, "We'll be okay. Mommy's stronger now, and we're not alone anymore." For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just surviving, she was rising. And soon the world would see just how powerful she had become. While Emily rebuilt her life one painful step at a time, Alexander was orchestrating a different kind of recovery, one that involved exposing Damien for the monster he truly was. Behind his calm demeanor, he was moving pieces like a chess master, gathering every scrap of evidence to ensure Damien would never escape justice. His private investigators worked around the clock. They dug through Damien's financial records, tracing shell companies registered under false names, offshore accounts used to hide millions, and a trail of gambling debts that contradicted the disciplined businessman image he flaunted. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, it was all there, carefully hidden but impossible to erase. But the financial crimes were only part of the story. Alexander's team also tracked down employees who had once worked for Damien, people who had been fired, bullied, or silenced. One by one, they came forward. Their testimonies painted a picture of a tyrant who manipulated contracts, coerced young women, and destroyed anyone who dared to stand in his way. Some spoke of seeing Roxanne with him at private meetings that crossed the line of professionalism long before Emily ever suspected. The most damning piece came from the subway incident itself. Security footage clearly showed Damien shoving Emily toward the tracks. It wasn't an accident, as his lawyers had tried to claim. It was deliberate, his hand pressing hard against her shoulder, his face twisted with rage. When Alexander saw the tape for the first time, his fists clenched, his jaw tightening. "This ends now," he muttered. Meanwhile, Roxanne's loyalty began to crumble. Damien had promised her the world, But as his empire faltered, she realized she had tied herself to a sinking ship. One late night, Alexander's investigators intercepted her leaving Damien's penthouse, her face pale, her phone clutched tightly. Days later, she reached out anonymously to one of Alexander's contacts. Her voice on the recording was sharp but tinged with fear. "I'll talk, but I want immunity. Damien's planning worse than you think." Alexander listened carefully to every word. Roxanne revealed secret meetings, bribes, and even threats Damien had made against Emily during her pregnancy. The evidence wasn't just strong, it was explosive. In his office overlooking the city skyline, Alexander spread the documents across his desk. It was all there: bank statements, testimonies, surveillance footage, recordings, enough to destroy Damien's career, his fortune, and his freedom. But Alexander wasn't satisfied with quiet justice. He wanted the world to see Damien fall the same way Emily had been forced to bleed, publicly, brutally, and without mercy. He leaned back in his chair, his mind already picturing the courtroom, the flashing cameras, the look on Damien's face when his power slipped through his fingers. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about redemption, for Emily, for her child, and for every victim who had suffered under Damien's reign. Alexander closed the file with finality. The storm was ready, and when it broke, Damien Tran would have nowhere left to hide. The mirror in Emily's hospital room had been her enemy for months. Every time she caught her reflection, she saw loss. The woman with sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, and a missing leg. But on this day, as she wheeled herself closer, something different looked back at her. It wasn't weakness anymore, it was resolve. Her rehabilitation had given her more than strength. It had given her courage. She no longer whispered to her child about surviving Damien's cruelty. Now, she promised them a future where he could never hurt them again. And for the first time in years, she felt ready to fight. Alexander noticed the change immediately. He found her one morning practicing with her prosthetic leg, her body trembling but her chin lifted high. Sweat dripped down her temples, but her eyes burned with determination. "You don't look like someone who's surviving," he told her quietly. "You look like someone who's about to win." Emily smiled faintly, a smile she hadn't worn in years. "Then help me look the part." And so he did. Within days, Alexander arranged for a team of stylists, designers, and therapists. Not to transform her into someone new, but to help her reclaim the woman she had once been, the woman Damien had tried to erase. The makeover wasn't about clothes or makeup. It was about rediscovering herself. The stylist chose outfits that balanced elegance with power, sleek dresses tailored to her frame, bold colors that lit up her complexion. A custom shoe was designed to match her prosthetic, turning what once felt like shame into a symbol of resilience. The makeup artist didn't hide her scars. She enhanced her natural beauty, allowing Emily's strength to shine through her eyes. When she finally looked in the mirror again, she gasped. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was radiant. She was strong. She was unafraid. Alexander watched from the doorway, his heart tightening. He had seen her bleed, cry, and fall apart. Now he saw her rise. And in that moment, he knew. Emily wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. She was preparing for war. As part of her preparation, Alexander walked her through the evidence his team had gathered. They sat together late into the night, documents spread across the table. Emily listened intently, her jaw tightening with every revelation. Fraud, betrayal, lies, all of it confirmed what her heart had known. Damien hadn't just tried to kill her. He had tried to erase her existence. "No more," Emily said firmly, closing the folder with steady hands. "You will face me. And this time, I won't be silent." The plan was set. A press conference loomed, one that would shatter Damien's carefully crafted image. Emily would stand before the cameras, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She would tell her story, reveal the truth, and strip him of the power he had once wielded over her. That night, as she lay in bed, her baby kicked gently, as if urging her forward. She smiled, whispering, "We're almost there. Mommy's ready." And when the world saw her again, they would no longer see Damien's discarded wife. They would see Emily Tran, reborn, unstoppable, and ready for justice. The press conference was held in one of Manhattan's grandest hotels, its ballroom transformed into a battlefield of flashing cameras and eager reporters. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. while a restless crowd gathered at the doors, buzzing with rumors. Everyone wanted to know the truth about Damien Tran, the millionaire whose empire was crumbling under the weight of scandal. Emily sat backstage, her hands folded tightly over her stomach. Her prosthetic leg ached from the morning's walk, but she refused to show weakness. Dressed in a tailored ivory dress with bold sapphire earrings, she looked nothing like the broken woman Damien had tried to bury. She looked like a woman reborn. Alexander knelt beside her chair, adjusting the microphone pinned to her dress. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Emily drew in a shaky breath, then nodded. "For my child. For every night he made me feel worthless. Yes, I'm ready." When they stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in a storm of camera flashes. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Emily's heart pounded, but Alexander's steady presence at her side anchored her. He placed a hand on the podium first, his voice carrying authority that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here today not for speculation, but for truth. Truth about a man who has built an empire on lies and cruelty. Truth about a woman who has survived his worst and found her voice." He turned toward Emily, his gaze filled with pride. "Today, Emily Tran will speak." The room went still. Emily gripped the podium, her hands trembling for only a moment before she steadied herself. Her voice, though soft at first, grew stronger with every word. "My name is Emily Tran. I am 6 months pregnant, and a few weeks ago, my husband pushed me onto subway tracks with the intention of killing me and our child." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Cameras zoomed in, capturing her steady eyes, her unflinching tone. "I lost my leg that night," she continued, lifting the hem of her dress slightly to reveal the sleek prosthetic. "But I did not lose my life. I did not lose my child. And I will not lose my voice." Behind the rows of reporters, murmurs grew louder, outrage spilling into every corner of the room. Emily opened the folder Alexander had placed on the podium and held up documents. "These are records of fraud, embezzlement, and illegal accounts tied to Damien Tran. Witnesses have come forward, employees silenced for years. Even his mistress has confirmed his corruption." The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing wildly. And then, as if scripted by fate, the ballroom doors opened. Damien strode in, his face pale but defiant. The crowd turned, microphones thrust toward him. Emily's heart raced, but she stood taller. For the first time, she faced him not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his equal opponent. "You tried to destroy me," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "But today, the world sees the truth." Damien froze under the weight of 1,000 eyes. And for the first time, his silence condemned him more than his words ever could. The empire he had built on lies was beginning to collapse, and Emily had struck the first blow. The press conference detonated like a bomb across the city. By evening, every news station replayed Emily's trembling yet powerful words on loop. Headlines blazed across screens: "Millionaire husband tried to kill pregnant wife. Damien Tran exposed. Fraud, betrayal, attempted murder." Damien's carefully curated image of charm and sophistication was obliterated in a single afternoon. Outside his office, protesters gathered with signs that read, "Justice for Emily and no more millionaire monsters." Investors withdrew millions overnight, stock in his company plummeting like a stone tossed into the sea. Damien's name, once synonymous with success, was now spat with venom in every household across the city. But the final blow came not from Emily, nor from Alexander's investigators, but from Roxanne. For weeks, she had been distancing herself, worried her reputation would sink alongside his. Now, with reporters swarming like vultures, she saw her opportunity to survive and to punish him. Late one night, Roxanne appeared on a primetime interview, her face perfectly framed by studio lights, her tone sharp but laced with faux regret. "Yes," she admitted, "I was in a relationship with Damien Tran. But I was manipulated too. He promised me everything: marriage, fortune, a future. What he never told me was that he was laundering money, bribing officials, and abusing his wife. When I found out, I was horrified." Her crocodile tears glistened, but what mattered most was what she revealed next. "I still have proof," Roxanne declared, sliding a flash drive across the table to the host. Emails, texts, recordings. Damien bragged about hiding money offshore, about silencing employees who questioned him, even about making sure Emily wouldn't be a problem anymore. The studio gasped, the internet exploded, and Damien's empire cracked beyond repair. Back in his penthouse, Damien hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering across marble floors. "Ungrateful witch," he roared. His reflection in the shattered mirror showed a man unraveling, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, the swagger gone. The phone rang non-stop with calls from lawyers, board members, even his own family, all demanding explanations he no longer had. He tried to fight back, issuing a public statement claiming Emily was unstable and Roxanne a bitter ex. But the damage was irreversible. The footage, the testimonies, the paper trail, they all screamed louder than his denials. Every word he uttered only made him look more desperate, more guilty. Meanwhile, Emily's courage inspired a tidal wave of support. Victims of abuse wrote letters to her hospital, thanking her for speaking out. Women who had been silenced for years began sharing their own stories online, using hashtags with her name. Emily had become more than a survivor, she was a symbol. And Alexander made sure Damien knew it. Sitting in his office, Alexander signed the final papers with his legal team. "By tomorrow morning," he said coldly, "Damien Tran won't just lose his reputation, he'll lose his freedom." In his penthouse, Damien poured himself another drink, his hands shaking. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. The empire he had built on lies, greed, and cruelty had collapsed, and the woman he tried to erase was now the reason the world would never forget him. The courthouse was packed to the brim. News cameras lined the steps outside, their lenses hungry for every frame of Damien Tran's downfall. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the kind that hummed through the marble walls like static electricity. Rows of spectators filled the benches, journalists, activists, ordinary citizens, all waiting to see justice delivered. Emily sat at the witness stand, her prosthetic leg resting firmly on the floor, her hands folded over her swollen belly. She wore a navy blue dress, simple but commanding, her hair pulled back to reveal eyes that no longer trembled with fear. This was not the Emily Damien had tried to silence. This was the Emily who had survived fire and risen stronger. Damien sat at the defense table, his once perfect suit rumpled, his face pale but defiant. His lawyers whispered frantically, shuffling papers, but he barely heard them. His eyes locked on Emily, burning with the same venom he had carried on the subway platform. Yet for the first time, she did not look away. The judge called for silence. "Mrs. Tran, you may proceed." Emily took a breath, steadying her voice. "My name is Emily Tran. I am 30 years old, 6 months pregnant, and the man sitting there," she pointed at Damien, "is my husband, the man who tried to kill me." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Damien's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. Sustained," the judge said sharply. "The witness will continue." Emily recounted everything. The years of emotional abuse, the isolation, the humiliation at the gala. Her voice cracked when she described the shove at the subway, the scream that still haunted her dreams, the blood that stained the tracks. Some spectators wiped tears from their eyes. Others clenched fists, their anger palpable. "And yet," Emily continued, her hand brushing over her belly, "even as I lay on those tracks, bleeding, broken, I felt my baby kick. That life reminded me I had something to fight for. Damien wanted me erased, but I'm here. I survived, and I will make sure he never hurts anyone again." The prosecution played the surveillance footage. The grainy video flickered on the screen, showing Damien's hand pushing Emily forward, her body tumbling onto the tracks. Gasps filled the room. Damien shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Then came Roxanne's testimony, her voice echoing from a recorded deposition. She detailed Damien's corruption, the offshore accounts, the threats he made. Her words cut deep, leaving no room for doubt. Finally, the prosecutor turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just fraud or abuse of power. This is attempted murder. Damien Tran believed his wealth made him untouchable. Today, you have the power to prove him wrong." The jury's faces were grave, their eyes heavy with the weight of truth. Emily looked at Damien one last time. She felt no fear, no hatred, only closure. He had tried to destroy her, but here she stood, stronger than ever. And when the gavel struck, the world would know his empire was finished. The courtroom was silent, so silent that Emily could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. 12 jurors filed back into their seats, their faces solemn, unreadable. Emily held her breath, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of her unborn child. She wasn't just waiting for justice for herself. She was waiting for justice for the life Damien had tried to erase. The judge cleared her throat. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" A woman in the front row stood, holding a folded piece of paper. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk accepted the note and handed it to the judge, who scanned it before speaking. Her voice was firm, steady, carrying the weight of finality. "On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. On the charges of fraud and embezzlement, guilty. On the charge of assault, guilty." The words fell like thunder, shaking the very air. Gasps and murmurs erupted in the courtroom. Damien's face drained of color, his jaw tightening, his hands clenching the table. For the first time, the arrogance slipped away. He looked not like a millionaire, not like a man of power, but like a caged animal, finally cornered. Emily exhaled, her eyes filling with tears. Not tears of pain this time, but of release. For years she had carried his cruelty like chains around her soul. Now, those chains shattered. She turned her gaze toward him, steady and unflinching. The judge's gavel struck once. Damien Tran is hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole for the first 15 years. His assets, including properties and accounts linked to fraud, are to be seized immediately. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail. Cameras flashing, pens scratching furiously across notepads. Outside, the crowd roared as the news spread. Justice had been served. Damien leapt to his feet, shouting, "This isn't over. You'll regret this, Emily." Security officers restrained him, forcing his arms behind his back. He struggled, but it was useless. The image of him being dragged from the courtroom in handcuffs would soon be splashed across every news outlet in the nation. Emily didn't flinch at his words. She sat taller, her chin lifted high. For once, his rage didn't pierce her. It bounced off, meaningless. She had won. Alexander, sitting just behind her, reached forward and gently touched her shoulder. She turned, meeting his steady gaze, and in his eyes she saw not just victory, but pride. As Damien disappeared through the side doors, Emily whispered softly to her unborn child, "We're free now. He can't hurt us anymore." The courtroom emptied slowly, but Emily lingered, savoring the moment. The woman who had been pushed onto train tracks, who had lost a leg, who had been humiliated and discarded, she had become the woman who stood up in court and toppled a tyrant. And as the gavel's echo faded, Emily knew this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a new life, one built on truth, courage, and freedom. The hospital room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp near the bed. Emily cradled her newborn daughter in her arms, her eyes swollen from tears but glowing with a peace she hadn't felt in years. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her own, warm and strong, as if promising her that the future would be brighter. She whispered softly, "You're my miracle. You saved me as much as I saved you." The delivery had been long and exhausting, but when Emily first heard her baby's cry, all the pain melted away. She had feared for so long that Damien's cruelty would define her child's life. But now, as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she knew the opposite was true. This child would be raised in love, not fear. In strength, not submission. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander stepped in, carrying a bouquet of lilies, his smile tender but his eyes filled with emotion. He paused at the sight of her holding the baby, almost as if the moment itself was too sacred to disturb. "Come here," Emily said softly, gesturing him closer. He approached, setting the flowers on the table before leaning down to look at the baby. "She's perfect," he whispered, awe lacing his voice. Emily's lips curved into a small smile. "Meet Lily Grace." Alexander's throat tightened. A beautiful name, just like her mother. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken feelings. Emily looked at him, her eyes shimmering. "You've done so much for me, Alexander. You gave me strength when I had none. You stood by me when I thought no one ever would. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," he said firmly. Then, after a pause, his voice softened. "Emily, I don't just admire you. I love you. I've loved you from the moment I saw you fight for your life on those tracks. And if you'll let me, I'll love Lily too. I'll be here, not as a savior, but as a partner." Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time. She reached for his hand, guiding it to rest gently on Lily's tiny chest. "Then stay," she whispered, "because for the first time, I believe we can build something real, something safe." Alexander leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. In that moment, the hospital room no longer felt like a place of endings. It felt like a place of beginnings. Months later, Emily stood on a stage at a charity gala hosted by Alexander's Foundation. She wore a flowing gown, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath, but she no longer cared who saw. Lily was safe in the arms of a nurse backstage, and Emily's voice carried across the hall. I was once told I was worthless, that my life had no value. But I stand here today as proof that no one has the right to define your worth but you. To every woman suffering in silence, your voice matters, your life matters, and you are stronger than you think. The audience rose in thunderous applause, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. Emily smiled, her daughter's future glowing before her, and knew with certainty she had not only survived, she had triumphed. So here we are, my dear friends. The story has reached its end, but if you're still here with me right now, I know something in Emily's journey touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, or of someone you love who has fought through darkness. Her story isn't just about betrayal or pain. It's about the quiet strength that lives in all of us, waiting to rise when life knocks us down. The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Emily lost so much, her marriage, her leg, the life she thought she had. But in that loss, she discovered freedom, resilience, and the courage to claim a future no one could take from her. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what Emily did. She couldn't control Damien's cruelty, but she could control how she rose from it. And isn't that the same for us? We can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose how to respond, how to grow, how to heal. Emily's story is a reminder that you are never defined by your scars. You are defined by your courage to keep going. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt broken, remember, you are not alone and you are not powerless. Healing is possible, transformation is possible, and like Emily, you can turn your pain into strength. If this story spoke to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that heal and inspire. Because together, we're building more than an audience. We're building a family of survivors, dreamers, and believers. And who knows? Maybe your story will be the next one that helps someone else find their strength.